With the NFL draft just wrapping up, it is time for me to go through every NFL team's draft class, starting in the NFC North. Basically, I am going to be going over the NFC North today, giving my thoughts, opinions on each pick, but keeping it simple to where everybody can understand what I'm talking about, of course, and providing some basic insights for these players. So if this is your favorite team, then I can help you better understand the player that you are getting. Starting off with Dylan Thieneman, what a value pick. I don't think this is necessarily a spot where you had to target early on, because this was a fairly deep safety class, in my opinion at least. But Thieneman falling to 25 is great value. I thought he could go in the top 20. I thought the Cowboys and the Vikings were in play. Even the Panthers had a chance to take him. So at 25, there's no problem going with him. Thieneman is a very good athlete. He is a ball hawk type safety who just makes plays. He's going to be at the right place at the right time. Extremely reliable player. Being a safety drafted in the first round, it's a little risky because safety isn't a super valuable position. However, Thieneman definitely carries that upside that you're looking for, and it was a great value, like I said. Now, Logan Jones, some people had him as the best center in the draft. I was a little bit lower on him. I think I had him as my, at the end of the day, center 3. But regardless, he was still kind of in that early third round range for me. Jones is just a solid player, and let's be real, like if you're drafting an Iowa offensive lineman, you know that he's probably going to be a pretty good player. It's pretty typical for Iowa offensive linemen to work out. Same with Iowa tight ends, of course, as we all know, with George Kittle, Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, and Sam Laporta. Overall, Logan Jones is a very solid center option. He was very good at picking up blitzes. He's athletic. He can climb to the second level. So with the Bears scheme, having an athletic center to be able to get to that second level to open up the run game a little bit more is certainly of value. And they needed one after Drew Delman retired. So it was more so a need, but also not bad value in the draft. Let me see what ESPN had him at. Overall 99, yeah, it's a little bit higher than what I had him as. I had him at probably 75, 76 maybe. And Sam Roush is another good option at tight end. I don't think it's necessarily where they should have went, mainly because they have Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet, but Roush is just a different blend of tight end. He's more of a true run blocker with some athletic traits to work in the pass game a little bit, but he's mainly going to be coming in as a blocking tight end, which is valuable. During the NFL draft, we've seen a major run on tight ends on day 2, which was shocking to me. But everybody wants to go back to that 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. So drafting Roush is just kind of another way to follow the trends of the league. Xavier Thomas was a major reach to me. I had him as a 6th round player. I, of course, like him as a returner, but in the 3rd round, that clearly means that they want him to be on the field fairly early on in his NFL career, which he's more of a project guy. But being from LSU, there's definitely potential. He's a speedster. He can open up the field. So that's what you're mainly getting out of Xavier Thomas. And I believe he had 5 career return touchdowns in college. So he's going to be an elite return man. But like I said, in the 3rd round, you could have went so many other ways at wide receiver that would have been more reliable. I think of Bryce Lance. Of course, I'm from North Dakota, so Bryce Lance is kind of a homer pick for me. However, he opens up the field very well, and he's 6'4", very solid after the catch. He has strong hands, so I think Bryce Lance would have been a better option, and he was a 4th round pick, so he was on the board. That's just my 2 cents on it. Malik Muhammad, however, was a solid pick in the 4th round. It's about where I had him going. I think I had him a little bit earlier in the 4th round, but regardless, pretty much where he should have went. Muhammad is a solid zone corner who will help in the run game fairly well. He played as a true freshman in college, so that's obviously a positive, playing at the highest level and playing as a true freshman. He has a ton of experience, so Can't really go wrong with him. And in the 4th round, that's pretty solid value for him. Keyshawn Elliott in the 5th round. I was a lot lower on him than the consensus, but he kind of fell a little bit. ESPN had him 236, I guess. So yeah, that's about where I had him. He's a solid run defender, but in the pass game, he struggles from what I've seen. So in the 5th round, he's one-dimensional, but I mean, day 3, you're kind of drafting traits anyways. So if you believe that you can develop his zone coverage ability over the middle of the field a little bit, his play recognition's a little bit behind, but he's a really reliable tackler, which is certainly going to help in the run game. So I think in the 5th round, it's a pretty solid move. There's probably other players on the board that I would have preferred, but I can't quite remember who would be on the board at that 5th round range. But he's all right. Nothing to write home about. And then their last pick was Jordan Van Denberg, and I never looked at him. 6th round pick, defensive tackle. Let's see what ESPN has. Yeah, it's just kind of a tough evaluation. ESPN just has him as like solid pass rusher that is more of a finesse defender rather than power, which can work, but as a defensive tackle, I feel like nowadays, especially with the run game really coming back, it's important to have those big guys, those 320-pound defensive tackles to really stop the run. But in the 6th round, you're likely going to see him on special teams, maybe rotating in as defensive tackles are getting tired. But overall, the Bears had a pretty solid draft, a couple reaches, a couple picks that I didn't think was really necessary, but also had some nice value with Thieneman, Malik Muhammad, and Logan Jones. I'm going to give them a B-. I think that's pretty fair. Nothing to write home about, but at the same time, they will have some clear difference makers on the field in their first year. On to the Detroit Lions. I honestly haven't looked a ton into their draft class, so I'm excited to really get into this. Blake Miller at 17 was a bit rich to me. However, you needed a tackle. With Blake Miller, he's clearly a right tackle, so Penei Sewell is going to have to move to left tackle. I'm not a huge fan of that. He's a good athlete, Sewell is. However, he was an all-pro right tackle. Like, it would have been ideal if they would have taken Monroe Freeling. He was on the board at the time, who was a true left tackle, but he also needed development. I'm sure they liked Blake Miller's experience, having 4 years of experience starting at Clemson, the most, I believe, out of any tackle, at least in the early rounds. And Miller's just a physical player. I think he's a safe pick. He's not going to really develop into like a Hall of Fame tackle. He doesn't have that insane upside. But Miller, with his experience, is a high floor player that is physical and fits this offense very well. Same with Derek Moore. Same with Jimmy Rolder. Both of those guys are more physical, imposing defensive players, especially Jimmy Rolder in the 4th round. Bit of a reach to me. However, like, this is totally a Dan Campbell pick. He's quick to trigger, plays downhill like they say here, and it'll certainly help in the run game. Moore is not an elite athlete, and he is more of a speed to power rusher. So with the lack of elite athleticism and his first go-to move is his speed, it kind of caused him to fall to the 2nd round, of course, because if you're a speed rusher and you're really fast, then similar to like David Bailey or Arvell Reese, then your value is going to be much higher. Moore is I would say another high floor type of pick. They really went safe here this year, and I'm not a huge fan of their draft overall. Keith Abney in the 5th is really good value though. I had him as a 3rd round corner, so that would probably be my like favorite pick out of all these picks for value wise. Abney is a smaller corner, but he's very solid in coverage. Sometimes he lets people open over the middle a bit too much on like slant routes or passes just underneath in general. He can be a little bit stiff when he's flipping his hips, which that's probably why he fell a bit. He's only 21, by the way, so he has room to develop. But like I said in my previous video when I was talking about the Vikings top draft needs, I look for hip fluidity. It is a very important thing as a cornerback. How quick can you turn around when a wide receiver suddenly changes his direction or breaks off his route? How quickly can you adjust to that and stick with him? Kendrick Law is a solid pick. It's a little early though, but he's just an elite athlete that'll help open up the pass game he will be more of a return specialist. I don't really envision him being on the field much because of Jameson Williams, but he's kind of that Jameson Williams backup or replacement. If he's tired, he might step in for a couple plays a game. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. And Jameson Williams has a little bit of an injury history, so I don't mind the idea or thought process behind that one. Skylar Gill-Howard is a very solid pick. The only reason he made it to the 6th round is because of an injury he sustained, which I'm not exactly sure. Oh, ankle injury, okay. But yeah, he's undersized, 280. So he's more of a finesse defensive tackle, which is fine. You need more of a rotation at D-tackle, and he gives you that pass rush upside. Tyree West is a solid pick in the 7th round. I think he was more of a UDFA, but like if you really like the guy, you might as well take him in the 7th round and not risk him signing elsewhere. And he's kind of a tweener. Is he really an edge rusher? Is he a D-tackle? Seems like nowadays teams don't really like the tweeners because of players like Isaiah Simmons, who really struggled for the Cardinals, who was kind of that safety linebacker tweener. And it's just tough because you don't really know where to play him, and he might be better at one position, but not have as much upside, or you might need him to play at a different position, and he's not as good. So it's a little confusing to decide what position to play him at. But overall, the Lions were very safe with their picks, but I was really happy with the Keith Abney and Skylar Gill-Howard picks for value. Outside of that, there was plenty of reaches. I did like the Derek Moore pick. I would say a B overall, just reliable. I don't think these guys really get him over the hump. They were 9-8, 4th in the NFC North last year. I think they should have probably swung a little bit more for the fences at a couple of these picks. However, if they can just stay healthy, they'll be back in the playoffs, I'm sure, next year. Moving on to the Packers, who, of course, did not have their 1st-round pick because of the Micah Parsons trade. However, I think they did a decent job at managing that lack of picks. In the 2nd round, they took Brandon Cisse, which was a great value at pick 20 there. And overall, I had him as a borderline 1st-round player. So you're basically kind of getting a 1st-round pick right there. Cisse is just an explosive player. He's one of the fastest corners that came out this year, and he is going to replace a major hole in that defense. So overall, I like his upside, and that explosiveness, of course, can't be coached. Chris McClellan, love the value here as well. Let's see what ESPN had. Yeah, 109, about the same as where I had him. Perfect value to take him, and they traded up for him, actually. So that was a bit of a surprise, but overall, just beefing up that defensive line with a, 313-pound defensive tackle, which will certainly help in the run game. And McClellan, despite his size, actually is a fairly good pass rusher. He had like 6 sacks last year, I believe, and he's solid in the run game, but he plays a little high sometimes, which is pretty typical for defensive linemen, especially at his size, 6'4". Sometimes he just struggles to hold his ground in the run game so he can get washed down. But in the 3rd round, I like his upside, and it's, of course, nice to beef up the defensive line. Speaking of defensive line, deny Dennis Sutton. In the 4th round is very good value. ESPN had him as a top 100 player, which I don't think I had that high, but he's a solid player with, back-to-back 8.5 sack seasons where he's just a nice, reliable option at the edge rusher position. Of course, they have Micah Parsons, but adding an extra edge rusher to maybe take the load off of Micah Parsons a bit because of that injury he just sustained is a smart option. And Dennis Sutton is just a really good bull rushing type edge rusher, which is different than what they have right now. So I actually like adding him. And then they go with Jager Burton. Haven't done any research on him. Definitely a reach. 242 is the overall rank for ESPN. In the 5th round, I understand taking a center on day 3 is about right. Like 5th round, that's a pretty good range for a center. And the Packers offensive line has been banged up over the years. So adding depth in the 5th round, can't go wrong. Damani Jackson in the 6th round was very solid value for the Packers. Adding more cornerback help, who will certainly play on the outside. He's 6'1" with good length, and he started at Alabama. So played against top competition, and that's what I like in the late rounds. Like, you get these players, same with Trey Smack, of course, he's a kicker, but he played in these tough environments with these loud crowds. And it's always a smart idea to just pick players that played in tough environments, that played at the highest level, because their transition will be much smoother in the NFL. And then Trace Mack, kicker. Can't go wrong adding a kicker. I'm not a huge fan of drafting him, but I would say Smack was probably the best kicker in the draft to me. I didn't really look at many kickers, to be honest. I don't really like to spend my time looking at kickers, but they've been kind of up and down since they got rid of Mason Crosby. So adding competition is always a good idea for the kicker position. Overall, considering the circumstances of not having a first-round pick, I think the Packers did a very good job, especially with their first 3 picks and Domani Jackson in the 6th round. I would say this is a B-plus draft considering the circumstances. They got a lot of value, and this certainly will help bolster their defense. Also, I do want to mention Matthew Golden to the moon. Getting rid of Romeo Doubs and Dontavion Wicks will certainly open up opportunities for him. So, little fantasy nugget there. With Matthew Golden finally breaking out next year, hopefully that actually happens. I would love to see it, not as a Vikings fan, but as a fantasy football fan. Now on to the Vikings. Of course, I have much more knowledge about the Vikings because I've been watching the press conferences and hearing just the coaches talk about them all. And overall, I turned out to be a fan of this draft class. Through the first 2 days, I wasn't a huge fan, but I think over time, I ended up really liking how the draft class shaped. Caleb Banks at pick 18 is ridiculous. It was way too high for him. I had him as kind of a mid-second round player, but if he just didn't get injured and he can stay healthy, he would have been probably in this range anyways. So if you truly believe that Caleb Banks can come back off of those 2 broken foot problems that he had, then he could be a Chris Jones level all-pro defensive tackle, and getting him at 18 would be great value. However, he's 320 pounds and he has broken foot issues. Like, that's a pretty big concern when it comes to these big guys. So hopefully they did their homework. I'm sure they did. Of course, I hope that he can stay healthy. Jake Golday in the 2nd round. I wasn't a huge fan, mainly because Ant Hill was my number 1 linebacker that I was hoping the Vikings would draft in the 2nd round, and he was on the board, and we didn't take him. But Jake Golday fits this defense very well, having pass rush experience, playing edge rusher at, I believe, Central Arkansas. He's good at defending the run, especially side to side. He's got great athleticism. He's not great in coverage, but I think that part of his game is still developing, and he's on an upward trajectory. Should be a great Blake Cashman replacement if he ends up getting released at any point here. And of course, Cashman's getting up there in age anyways, so I think it's a smart idea to invest in the defense. I know the defense was great last year, but we're getting older and older, and we didn't force nearly as many turnovers last year compared to the year before. So investing in quality defensive players, especially along the front 7, will make it easier to get home to the quarterback and not have to blitz everybody, every play. Big citrus. Dominique Orange goes in the 3rd round. This is probably one of my favorite picks in the draft for the Vikings. Of course, he's listed as a defensive tackle. Same with Caleb Banks. People might be like, okay, why do we take 2 defensive tackles with their first 3 picks when we have extreme needs at DB? It's fair. However, Dominique Orange is more of a nose tackle. He's going to line up over the center in our 3-4 defense. It'll be a perfect fit, and I love him pairing up with Caleb Banks and Jalen Redmond. Banks and Redmond will be kind of those 3-5 techniques, and then we'll have Dallas Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel rushing off the edge, which of course is perfect for them. So overall, we definitely needed to address the defensive tackle position because we really only had Jalen Redmond on the roster. So having Banks and Orange is going to be extremely valuable. Speaking of extremely valuable, Caleb Tiernan, pick 33 in the 3rd round. He was valued at 84 here. I had him as a mid-2nd round player. So having a 6'8" offensive tackle as a swing tackle, aka he can play either side, left tackle or right tackle, and even move into guard if need be to replace anybody who gets injured. He's going to be a very solid insurance option, especially with all the injuries last year. And then Jacoby Thomas in the third round is a great pick. It is too early for me, but this guy can ball. He's a great ball hawk with extreme physicality in the run game. He struggles to tackle a little bit because of his aggressive nature and like hit stick mentality, but like he's just a very aggressive player, but he was taken a bit too early, probably a round too early, but we didn't have a fourth round pick. So if we really like the guy, we have to take him, and he could be a very solid Harrison Smith replacement. They're very similar, with Harry the Hitman as a very physical safety and ball hawk. So Jacoby Thomas is a sneaky pick in the third round who I think is going to play a good amount of football right away. Max Bredesen in the fifth round. Oh my good golly. A fullback in the fifth round is wild. However, as I said on X, if you guys want to follow me on X, at Nord's Notes or Couch Football, the Vikings are clearly trying to establish a physical, imposing offense and defense, with also adding in athletic talents like Demings and Claiborne, who we'll talk about in a second. Bredesen is a fullback, kind of similar to Kyle Juszczyk, and he should be a solid player to start right away at fullback. He'll play a good amount, and we needed to replace C.J. Ham, so it makes sense. It's just too early for me. Moving on to Charles Demings, one of the most electric entertainers as a personality. Watch his interview. Super, super positive and friendly guy. He's not cocky. He's just a fun guy to be around, I think, is the best way to explain it. And Demings is an elite athlete, elite athlete, and he's 6'1". He can play on the outside. He's going to be a great player, and his main caveat is he doesn't really know football that well. He's not super sound with his technique. However, being an elite athlete, something you can't coach, and having that natural ball hawking mentality will be a huge help in the NFL. Coming from Stephen F. Austin is going to be the major question mark. How is he going to translate to the NFL? And will he be able to pick up technique? His technique is extremely important to have in the NFL, but with his elite athleticism, it can make up for a lack of technique early on in his career a bit. And he has some return experience similar to Damon Claiborne. So both of these guys could be potential returners in kick return or punt return. Now going on to my favorite pick for the Vikings in this draft, Damon Claiborne, the Wake Forest running back who is an absolute speedster, ran in the 4.3s, and he's super, super shifty, and he's going to fit so well in this offense. He's great at reading blocks, understanding where the open lane is. Sometimes when I was watching him, he would bounce it outside quite often. And of course, it makes sense with his speed, especially in college. But in the NFL, everybody's faster. Everybody's more physical. So instead of bouncing it outside, he's got to follow his blockers a little bit more. However, Claiborne is not super small. Of course, he's undersized for running back, but he's not going to be a short yardage type running back. He's not going to be a goal line back. That's for Jordan Mason to handle. He's going to be an extremely valuable change of pace running back for the Vikings, who will provide value in the passing game, especially when Aaron Jones retires or leaves next year. And he's coming into an environment that's going to be friendly for him. Aaron Jones is one of the best people on the Vikings as a person, and of course he's a captain. Claiborne's going to learn a ton from him, and Jordan Mason, of course, seems like a very friendly player to be around. He's not going to be coming in and asked to carry the ball 20 times a game. However, I do think he's going to play it as a rookie quite often. I think he'll come in, especially due to injuries. Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason have an injury history. One of them gets injured. Claiborne's going to probably get 8 to 10 carries a game, but if both of them can stay healthy, I think Claiborne gets 3 to 4 carries as kind of that change of pace guy. He can take it to the end zone anytime he touches the ball, and you have to manufacture some touches for him every single game, maybe even give him some screen passes and just let him work with his natural vision. I think Claiborne is going to be an extremely valuable pick, and the last note would be hopefully he can really improve with his carrying. He didn't fumble the ball at all until his final year, but I believe he fumbled 3 times last year. So hopefully he can kind of fix that up. And then the last pick, Gavin Gerhardt. Never heard of the guy. Seems like a very smart, instinctual offensive lineman who was, 320 pounds? It doesn't say, but he's, I believe, 320 pounds, which is ideally what you're looking for in a center. We don't want to get pushed back because we've gotten bitten by that in the past where we had Garrett Bradbury, a small, 280-pound center. We want a strong physical center. And he has 49 games of experience starting at Cincinnati. Was in the 7th round, taking a guy that played against tough competition, that has this much experience and knowledge, I think is a smart move, and hopefully he can develop nicely as a center, and maybe he even has a chance to start, not this year, but maybe next year or down the road. But overall, I really like this Vikings class. There were some reaches, but I think they established an identity. The one gripe would have been I was hoping we would draft a wide receiver, which sucks, but I think that kind of signs that we are going to find one in free agency. So hopefully maybe Tyreek Hill or DeAndre Hopkins comes in and plays for the Vikings. Overall, I am going to give this a B+ for the Vikings. Very happy with this draft overall, but also acknowledging that there are risks with Banks. Demings, Bredesen's an early pick. So that is my thoughts for the NFC North. I hope you guys enjoyed me yapping about each of these picks. And in the future, I will be, of course, going over all the other divisions. So make sure you guys stay tuned, subscribe, turn on the bell so you guys know when your favorite team is talked about. I am Levi Nordstrom, and this has been Couch Football, and I will see you guys in the next video.